Evening, folks. Hope you're doing okay. It's time for some more hobby nightmares. It's me getting involved here with a broken voice and generally run-down appearance. My God, if you could see me right now, I am crawling out of my backside to get to the microphone. It is one of those weeks, I'm afraid. But always tends to be around New Year's where I fall ill with some sort of allergy or something. Anyway, if you like what I do, the subscribe button is down below, and the real subscribe button is next to that, the bell notification icon. Let's get involved with some hobby nightmares, shall we? This is the first time in a long time where I've not had time, because I've been ill, to read any of these before I start. So, just getting it out there, if these aren't very good, or these aren't what you want to hear, I apologise, but I have not had time to read them, but it also means that you're going to get some pretty organic responses to your questions and your stories. So, let's get involved, shall we? Let's have a little drink of tea. First comes from Wild Alaskan. And he says, "Hello again, North. A pleasure to speak to you as always. I've been sitting on this story for a while now, procrastinating on typing it all out. But today, I listened to your Games Workshop Stories episode where it was declared there are no salty orc players. I did say that, yes. Mainly I said that because I've never really come across one because... And again, I've not played Orc since 8th edition. No, 7th edition. Yeah, 7th edition. And they were so bad in terms of being random, being odd, that Orc players generally just shrugged their shoulders whenever they lost models, which I quite liked. Anyway, he says, and now I must tell you this story, as it revolves around our local Orc player, whom I shall call Jay. But first, a little backstory. The friendly local game store that I used to run typically dedicated Sundays for wargaming. This led to an inside joke that we were all attending church, quote-unquote, when we gathered to roll dice. In spring of 2013, I decided that it would be fun to do a large-scale narrative game on Easter Sunday, and had enough interest that I began planning. Okay. I made separate mission briefings for the Imperium and Xenos players. We had no Chaos players at the time. Explaining the mission. The Arch Mechanicus Easter Surprise had suffered some unknown catastrophe and crashed on an uninhabited planet. The Easter Surprise had spent nearly a millennium exploring various regions of the sector, gathering lost and esoteric technologies which must be recovered at all costs. The most valuable asset to be recovered was the ship's data core, which was rumoured to still be intact. I like this. This is kind of like a half and half role-playing campaign and Warhammer 40k. I like it. On the tabletop, I set up a pair of 6x4 tables, connected on the long ends by a 6x7 board, effectively making the shape of an H. I also had made up some objective markers ahead of time, which, when flipped over, would reveal a number corresponding to a chart I'd made. Some of the objectives were good eggs, which would give some sort of bonus, and some were rotten eggs, which would cause some sort of malady. Dude, if you're going to get involved in this Easter egg thing, you should have, like, actual eggs, like Easter eggs, be rewarded to players who get the good ones. You know, just saying. And a real egg goes to the ones who, you know, get the rotten ones. The severity of how good or bad the objectives were increased as they got closer to the centre of the bridge, where the data core was placed. There were also several objectives which were explosives of some sort, and a D6 roll by the discovering player would determine if the explosive went off immediately or could be used by the player later that game. Each objective was worth victory points, with the data core being worth the most. Right, so even if you get a bad one, it's worth a victory point. Very clever. Okay. On the day of the event, Jay showed up with a new addition to his army, a unit of freshly painted Deathcopters. He had spent a lot of time painting them just for this game, and it showed. His theory was that having a fast-moving unit would be advantageous in getting the data core before anyone else. Oh, yeah, good plan. Let me just have a little cough here. There we go. I'm just saying, if I have to say wah in this story, please don't expect me to say it with any gusto. You know, Daddy's ill. Anyway, moving on. Everyone deployed, and the game started. Some players immediately attacked other players, some made a mad dash for nearby objectives, and everyone slowly made their way towards the data core. Everyone, that is, except for Jay, whose deathcopters were outpacing everything other players had brought. Jay was the first to make it to the bridge area, where the objectives began to get much, much worse and much, much better, respectively. The first objective he encountered was a good one, and as it turns out, I still have the original objective list in my Google Drive nearly a decade later. I can copy and paste. Excellent. And this one was Precision Teleporter. A unit that comes into contact with this objective may choose to immediately move exactly 3d6 inches in any direction and deploy using the rules for Deep Strike without scattering. Using a precision teleporter discharges its power cells and it may not be used again. Okay, that's cool. Jay let out an excited wah, okay, there we go, and rolled for his distance. He got a relatively high roll, as I recall, like a 15 or something. It was enough for him to get people on another objective this way, on his way to the data core. His deathcopters landed on a new objective. He flipped it over, and we consulted the chart. Chromatic displacement node. The unit is enveloped by a bubble of space-time and teleported to a time before they, or the node, existed. Since the node never existed, it could not have teleported itself back to a time before it existed. This causes a temporal paradox. Though, since the unit that activated the device never existed either, no one seems to notice. Remove all models in the unit from play as a casualty, with no saves of any kind allowed. Wow. Wow. The happy, excited face that is typically displayed by the average Orc player slowly faded into the face of a man who's just walked in on his mother being bummed by the milkman. Shock, then realisation, then rage, all in quick succession. Jay picked up his entire tray of dice and hurled them at the wall. He then scooped up his brand new deathcopters and unceremoniously tossed them into the cardboard box he had stored his models in, and stormed out of the store, shouting and cursing at nobody in particular. What followed was one of the most awkward moments of silence I've ever been involved in. The other players continued, and after 10 minutes or so, Jay came back in and offered his apologies to everybody. He picked up where he had left off before his mishap, eventually claiming the data core before anybody else got to it. Somebody else collected more victory points overall, and Jay came in a close second. I wish I had a more clever ending to the story, but I think I'll go play Dark Tide instead. Cheers. Good choice. Sometimes it's not so much that bad things have happened, it's that they know that they've immediately... Like, if he just started laughing at the very start of that, he'd have been fine. But the fact that he was, like, shocked, then angered straight away, and everybody saw that he was shocked and angered, it just forced him more into that little bubble of absolute rage. Until finally he just gives up and just acts out. But there we go. There is one salty Orc player. Definitely not Alfarius says. Which basically means you are Alfarius. Hey North, love the channel, and it's always good to listen to an episode of Hobby Nightmares, whether it's eating, painting, or just doing general stuff. Cheers, man. I thought I'd share my first couple of years in the hobby, as to be completely honest, it's all been a bit of a nightmare to begin with, and I've surprised myself how I'm still going strong when it comes to Warhammer. I'm sorry to hear that, man. Sorry to hear that. I might not read all of this because it reads like a novel, but I'll definitely read some of it. Let me see how long it goes on for. Nah, it should be fine. It should be okay. Right. So, the best place to start was when I got my first army. I'd been to my local Warhammer club, the school I used to go to, and I got an idea of what there was on offer in terms of what to get. You had your usual Space Marine players, with the majority being Dark Angels due to the Dark Vengeance box set that came out with 7th edition. We also had a Xenos player as well, which ended up drawing my interest more to the Tau. So, I saved up, I went to my local Games Workshop to get the Tau Start Collecting box set. I went in and asked about starting to collect Warhammer 40k. Well, the guy working at the store started to advertise the Dark Vengeance box to me as a good way to get started, as it had the rulebook and data sheets for everything in the box. Well, being the stubborn person I was, I said I wanted to collect Tau, to which he had about a 20-minute back and forth on why I want Tau particularly, and why it was beneficial to start with the Dark Vengeance box set instead. Yeah, dude, you're not being stubborn. You're not being stubborn. You want what you want. But neither is he being a dick. He's not being... he's being a dick now. Here's the thing. When you come in and you say, I want to get started with Warhammer, and he says, okay, the Dark Vengeance box set is the way to go, right? And in 8th edition, the Dark Imperium box set is the way to go. He's trained to say that because that will get him a KPI that will make sure he's not going to get sacked when he starts selling those box sets. So that's fine. There's no problem there. As soon as you start saying that you want to collect Tau, however, that's the time to drop the act and start just saying, yeah, go and collect Tau, no problem, right? I would actually become disinterested at this point as a staff member. If you said to me you didn't want to start collecting, you didn't want to get the Dark Vengeance and you wanted to get Tau, I would tell you a few cool things about Tau, point you towards the box set, and then say, that's the start collecting box set, got everything that you need for Tau, and here's the codex to use for your Tau army. I will be over here helping out other customers, have fun, and I'd go, because you don't need me anymore, right? To stick around and like carry on trying to give you the Dark Vengeance box set, that's when the dick behaviour comes in, do you know what I mean? Eventually, he did give in, and I got my Tau along with the codex to start me off. There you go. So he still made a sale, but it wasn't a KPI sale. It did annoy me that he was trying to get me to buy something I had little to no interest in, but now I understand that he was just trying to meet a target of selling starter boxes, yes. It took me about a week to build everything, and I was ready to face the world with the Tau Star Collecting box set, a squad of Pathfinders, and a Devilfish. So, I started going to my local Warhammer club each and every Wednesday after school. We only had about an hour and a half, so if we were lucky, maybe we managed to get to turn 2. For the purpose of confidentiality, I'm not going to use these people's actual names. There were about 5 of us in total. We had 2 people called Dan and Leroy, who played Dark Angels. Someone called Clive, who was a Tau player like myself, and one last guy called Jake, who played Chaos, quote-unquote. Now, Jake will be the topic of interest here. He was about 2 years older than me, and played Chaos as a loose term. I don't really use this term often for people, but he was your typical final boss of this guy, and a true neckbeard in training. Now, I may be wrong here, as I didn't know a lot in terms of rules back in the day, but it was kind of suspicious that he was using Guard in a Chaos Army, Imperial Guard, in a Chaos Army, which I wasn't sure was allowed, especially when he used them with demons that isn't legal in the current rules of today. So that was allowed in 7th edition because you had this stupid ally rule where you could mix and match armies together. It was generally Games Workshop's really weird attempt to get more money out of people as the edition wound down. Where you said, yeah, you could have demons with Imperial Guard because they're Traitor Guard, you can have this and you can have that. So technically, yeah, it is doable. It's not anymore, as you said. I don't think it's in the rules anymore where you can just like mix and match different armies. But it was at the time. Same with detachments, and they were a cancer. The detachments were terrible back in 7th edition. I know this isn't my place to say or judge people at all, but his army looked like it was slapped together in one large purchase. His army literally was Demons of Khorne, Imperial Guard, and Astra Militarum start collecting box sets, one of each, along with 2 Dark Vengeance boxes. All fielded grey, of course, except for the 2 Dark Vengeance boxes that were not painted to tournament level, with the Death Guard green-looking base coat, along with the Chaos Flesh being smothered on everything. By the way, this wasn't even the worst part. This is just to give a setting. Okay. I would have been completely fine with his army and playing against it with no problem if it wasn't for the amount of times this guy cheated and used disgusting tactics to win. If I was to go into detail, this would take up the entire video, so I'll just give the highlights. First of all, he would state that his warlord, which was a Tempestus Scion in a cloak, was a Psyker without even asking his opponent if this proxy was okay to be used. If he asked, I'm sure we'd have all been fine with it. Yeah, I mean, you just ask. I've never known a proxy that isn't egregious to not be allowed. Do you know what I mean? Anyway. Secondly, he used to quite literally make up rules on the spot. I should have known better due to his lack of codex at hand. Such as, and these are some of my favourites, his mortar team can fire a paintball round, as he called it. What? Into an enemy unit, and all its units for that round have to fire at the unit in the shooting phase, while not having to roll for hits. So it's like a marker light, basically. That his psychic can summon demons that can be loaded into the same mortar and fired into enemy lines. That his Taurox Prime can perform an action known as Carpet Sweep that fires rounds the size of about 7 large blasts onto the board, each hitting 20 mortal wounds. He took around 10 tanks off the board in one turn when he pulled that one out of his arse. Okay, I'm not going to read the rest of that because these are just like making me annoyed. So, safe to say this guy was a cheater. He was also a terrible winner / opponent to play against, always siding with people who had large forces, so games would be the equivalent of a mercy killing, and doing childish things like forcing people to use their models as objectives when he had any chance of being beaten. Okay. This happened to me at one time, as a matter of fact. After Tau, I chose to move to Space Wolves. Oh, bad choice. Accumulating quite a large force, along with a nice Stormfang gunship, which I was ready to release upon the tabletop. Well, my first time back at the club with my gunship, ready to use, Jake took one look at it and said, "We'll use that as an objective to balance the game." As mentioned previously, I could do nothing against him. I knew he was spouting absolute tripe, as without the gunship, the game is quite literally Jake's 3 start collecting boxes, along with Clive's Tau force of Kadra Fireblade, 2 squads of Fire Warriors, a Piranha, and Stealth Suits against me. Okay, dude, why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? This is the thing. There comes a time in Hobby Nightmares, right? This goes on quite... No, I'll read the rest of it. There comes a time in Hobby Nightmares where you literally have to take a stand. The Hobby Nightmare has become here, not your opponents. Your opponents are the nightmare, that's true. But it's also you, man. You should really, really, really just be saying to this person, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. That is not a kosher thing to do. I don't want to play this game with you. And if they start having a go saying, well, are you scared of losing? Say, no, I lose all the time. I enjoy losing. You know, I'm very good at it. I've had a lot of practice. But I believe you cheat. And I don't enjoy my games with you. Just, there has to come a point where you draw a line in the sand. It's never the abusee's fault. It's never the victim's fault, right? But there does come a time when you are doing yourself no favours. And so writing into me and saying, this guy did this, and this. When in reality, you know, you should have called it 20 minutes ago in this story, right? You should have called it then. And said, no, we're done. I'm not playing you anymore, right? If you carry on going back, you're sitting in the hot water and complaining it's hot. There comes a time when you just have to take the gloves off and say, no, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm sorry, right? I'm going to read on here, and if it doesn't get any better, I'm just going to stop the story and go on to another one. Because, like, I'm with you. You're the victim here. Yep, I really hope that you've got a backbone these days. You're a kid at this stage, you know. But there does come a time when this is just not great, right? You need to stand up for yourself. And just most of 40k is choosing your opponents. It's not choosing your army or your codex or anything like that. It's choosing your opponents. What you're doing here is failing in that first golden rule. Choose your opponents. I don't mean choose your opponents so you can beat them. I mean choose your opponents so you think you're going to have a good time. As soon as somebody proves that they're not capable of having the trust placed in them, of your time, move on. Never play them again. And tell them why if they ask. So, finally Jake would quite literally claim factions and knew scarily little about the lore, to the point that he didn't know there were 4 Chaos Gods. One time Dan switched to Wordbearers and actually had a nicely painted army. Of course, when Jake saw this, he quite literally threw a tantrum, saying that he was Chaos and Dan was stealing his army. He actually tried to pose What? He actually tried to say that Dan stole models from him, but nobody believed him. Okay. Well, 8th edition finally came around, and I was geared up with the rules for once I made sure to know them all, along with my codex and my Space Wolves. So when I went to the club again, and to my surprise, once the 8th came out, Jake magically stopped going to the club, and when he did come, he never brought any models with him to field against me. Kind of suspicious, if you ask me. Okay. I'm going to say this, right? Where I'm going to, like, stop the thing there. I'm going to stop the story there. Alfarius, I know you say you're not Alfarius, but I'm just going to call you Alfarius. I completely understand where you're coming from in that this introduction to the hobby has not been great. I'm with you, man. I am completely with you. Right, and I'm really sorry that the hobby hasn't gone the way that you want it to go right now. But I honestly believe that you are your own worst enemy right now. You need to be the guy to take control of your own hobby, to sit back and go, listen, what do I want out of this hobby, and who do I want to play with? At the end of the day, you're playing with toy soldiers. That's what you're doing, right? And you're using your spare time to do that. If you're going into every single game and just accepting that these people you're going to be playing against are the people that are in the hobby, you're not in the hobby. That's just not what you're doing. As soon as your time is precious, your spare time is precious. If you take the trouble of going to a club and you don't enjoy playing with somebody, don't play with them again. I've done this with actual friends, like actual people that I know and respect and care about. I've gone to play Warhammer with them. I've not gotten along with them in terms of Warhammer. They've been very salty, very arrogant winners or bad losers, and I just don't play them again, right? I just stand back and go, okay, I'm not playing with that person again. That's fine. I've done that with friends. So why you can't do it with strangers is beyond me. Tell them where to go. Just say, no, I don't want to. There's no need to be a dick about it. Just say, look, good game. I hope you enjoyed it. And pack up your models and move on. It's all about choosing your opponent, man. And if you keep doing the same shit over and over and over again and expecting different results, you're not going to get along in this hobby. It's just what it is. It's just not going to go very well. Right. That is all I'm going to do for today because my voice is readily ready to go. I love you a long time. I will be back on Friday with more Hobby Nightmares, and I'll be back tomorrow when hopefully I've administered my voice a little bit more, and we're going to talk about the Tau. So, love you a long time. Speak to you then. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Have a good one. Bye.